the restrictions that allow people to get married. Now, I'm not at all defending the idea of restricting blacks from being married. That's not my point. My point is that his point that this is a redefinition doesn't go through. It's not a redefinition whatsoever. And if that's not a redefinition, then we are not, well, his response is, you can complain about this, a redefinition of marriage, but we redefine marriage all the time. We don't. This is a redefinition because we've changed the fundamental meaning of marriage if what we do is identify same-sex unions as marriages instead of just domestic partnerships. This is something that has never been done in history. We are not doing the changing. They are doing the changing. And so this has nothing to, listen, same-sex marriage and interracial marriage have nothing in common, Todd. There is no difference, obviously, between a black and a white human being because skin color is morally trivial. There is an enormous difference, I think, obviously, between a man and a woman. Ethnicity has no bearing on marriage. Sex is fundamental to marriage. And what upsets me then is that there is virtually no attempt by Keith Olbermann or anyone else, frankly, to take these concerns or those kinds of points seriously. No attempt to engage the problem of redefinition. And what is the problem of redefinition? Once you say we can redefine marriage to include same-sex couples, there is no principled reason not to redefine it to include anyone else. I mean, I'm talking about polygamy or incestuous unions. I mean, look at it, in the past, people wouldn't allow incestuous unions either, and now we don't allow it, but they didn't allow interracial unions, so the same argument can be raised there. What about polyandry or polyamory, many husbands, or just group marriages? What then, when we redefine marriage, in this case, is the principled reason why these other kinds of relationships wouldn't naturally be allowed for the same reasons? Every single thing that Keith Olbermann has said in his piece applies equally to all of those other things, and that is the danger of redefining marriage, and he never addresses it.
Okay, here's another one from Keith Olbermann of MSNBC. I want your thoughts on this. He says, not allowing gay marriage has led to lots of bad heterosexual marriages and shame.
And uncountable in our history are the number of men and women forced by society into marrying the opposite sex in sham marriages or marriages of convenience or just marriages of not knowing. Centuries of men and women who have lived their lives in shame and unhappiness and who have, through a lie to themselves or others, broken countless other lives of spouses and children, all because we said a man could not marry another man or a woman could not marry another woman. The sanctity of marriage. How many marriages like that have there been? And how on earth do they increase the sanctity of marriage rather than render that term meaningless?
Okay, Greg, this is a little trickier because he seems to be kind of tugging at the whole sanctity of marriage. Don't you really believe in the sanctity of marriage?
Well, yeah, but that's because marriage, I mean, to answer that particular question, Todd, when we say sanctity of marriage, we mean something very particular. We're not relativists there, where you can put any definition into the M-A-R-R-I-A-G-E word. In fact, it wouldn't be sacred if anything could be called a marriage. To be sacred or to be holy means to be set aside or set apart. Marriage is something particular. And so the idea of sacred in marriage fits together. If what we mean by that is it's unique and distinctive, okay? If we open it up so there is no uniqueness or distinction, then it doesn't seem to make any sense to call it sacred or separate or distinct or any holy in any sense. And I'm not trying to import moral concepts in here. I'm just talking about the uniqueness of the thing. So he's saying if you really believe in sanctity of marriage, then you should remove the restrictions that make it sacred or sanctified to begin with. That strikes me as kind of a contradiction. This is an appeal of playing with words and playing on experiences people had that are meant to tug at our emotions, and I think he's effective in doing that, especially when he makes comments, these kind of broad, sweeping comments like thousands of people were forced by society into relationships they didn't want. Well, I don't know that anybody forced homosexuals to marry the opposite sex. They might have felt compelled by social pressure in some sense. All right, well, why is that the fault of people who believe in in heterosexual marriage or marriage is a certain definition. I don't know why that falls on our shoulders. It's like the suggestion is if it's our fault. Nobody was forcing anybody. It's just like back alley abortions. You're forcing people into back alley abortions if you don't allow abortion. Nobody's forcing anybody. It's a choice that they make. They don't have to make that choice. Listen, for thousands of years, people have been in homosexual relationships and stayed in them and enjoyed them and were fulfilled by them in a certain measure. So it isn't like there's no other choice for them but to live a lie, like Olbermann is suggesting. Nobody's forcing anything. This question, his suggestions, his solutions do not in any wise, in any meaningful way, increase the nature of the sanctity of marriage, and the fact that we have some standards for what marriage ought to be for the good of culture, which he never addresses, for the good of children, which he never addresses. He acts like those arguments don't even exist. Rather, we should start hacking away at one of the foundational institutions of civilizations, because in the past, he thinks some people lived in unhappy relationships being married to heterosexuals when they were really homosexuals. That's his argument. That's what it amounts to.
Daniel in Iowa City writes this: if sexual orientation is the issue, then what's preventing those who claim to be bisexual from marrying a person from each gender? Should they be allowed to marry multiple people?
Well, I think Keith Olbermann's answer would have to be yes, and I only say this not because he's addressed it, but because of the arguments that he's offered. What was just described just a moment ago about forcing people into relationships that they don't want, they're unhappy into, that would apply here. Living in shame and unhappiness and in secrecy, that is, for somebody who loves two people who happen to be members of the opposite sex, that would apply here. The argument about interracial marriage would apply equally here. In other words, the thing about redefining marriage would apply here. Who are we to say that a marriage is just for two people? Why not three or four or more?
30
Why
seconds.
Not mixing it up?
Okay, when we come back from this break, we've got some more to play from Keith Olbermann of MSNBC. He says same-sex marriage is really about love. And what business does the state have dealing with love? Greg Koukl is our guest. He's president of Stand to Reason, based in Signal Hill, California. Our call-in number, 1-877-623-MY-IE, 877-623-6943, or talk back at issuesetc.org.
One is gonna lose their soul. Hey, love is my religion. Love is my religion. Love is my...
Welcome back to Issues Etc. I'm Todd Wilkin. 10 minutes left with Greg Koukl, president of Stand to Reason, based in Signal Hill, California, co-author of the book Relativism, Feet Firmly Planted in Mid-Air. We're talking about same-sex marriage, responding to Keith Olbermann's arguments that he made recently on MSNBC in favor of gay marriage. You'll find a link to Greg Koukl and to Stand to Reason under the on-demand page of our website, issuesetc.org. Greg, let's listen to one comment made by MSNBC's Keith Olbermann. He says that same-sex marriage is really about love.
You want to sanctify marriage? You want to honor your God and the universal love you believe he represents? Then spread happiness. This tiny, symbolic, semantical grain of happiness. Share it with all those who seek it. Quote me anything from your religious leader or book of choice telling you to stand against this. And then tell me how you can believe both that statement and another statement, and another one which reads only, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You are asked now by your country, perhaps by your Creator, to stand on one side or another.